many Bible readers find the book of Ezekiel chaotic and disorienting. 1 minute, there's wheels within wheels, and the next you're lost in a sea of judgment against the nations. And to make matters worse, it's like trying to piece together a story when the chapters are all out of order. That's because the book of Ezekiel is not written chronologically. It jumps back and forth over the period of 25 years, covering events both before the destruction of Jerusalem and after. And without knowing the dates, it's easy to get lost and to miss what Ezekiel is trying to say. But what if you had a single map which could guide you through every vision and oracle and historical event covered in this book? Well, I've created this map, and today we are going to use this timeline to walk through the book of Ezekiel date by date. Now you can download this timeline in the description below and stick around so that you can see the dramatic shift in Ezekiel's message from prophecies of doom to promises of hope and restoration. And I promise you, it will make this book finally click. And please also click the like button and subscribe. It really helps this channel reach more people. The book opens, in the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, I was among the exiles by the Chebar Canal, and the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. And then Ezekiel clarifies for us. He says that this was the 5th year of the exile of Jehoiachin. That's the critical piece of information we needed, because we know when the exile of Jehoiachin was. It was in the year 597. But this wasn't the first exile, rather it was the second. The first exile to Babylon was in the year 605 during the reign of Jehoiakim. Now, where were these exiles taken? Well, we read in Ezra chapter 2 that the exiles were taken from Judah to Tel Melah and Tel Harshna, and look here. Here is Ezekiel's Chebar Canal, right there between the Tigris and Euphrates. Well, Jehoiakim is going to reign for 11 years, and Jehoiachin will reign for 3 months. But this is actually pretty easy to remember because the final 4 kings of Judah are going to alternate between 3 months and 11 years, and then 3 months and 11 years. And 3 of these 4 final kings of Judah are all brothers. They are sons of Josiah. Now Jehoahaz, he is going to be exiled and taken to Egypt. And Jehoiakim, he dies at the age 36. Jehoiachin is exiled, taken to Babylon, and so is Zedekiah. Okay, back to Ezekiel. So his call is going to take place specifically in the 5th year of the exile of Jehoiachin. Now that would place Ezekiel 1:1 in the year 593. Now we are also told that this was the 30th year, the 4th month on the 5th day. Now, we're not told what the 30th year means, but most scholars agree this is probably referring to Ezekiel's 30th year. That is, when Ezekiel turned 30 years old. Now, why does this matter? Well, it matters because Ezekiel is a priest. And in Numbers chapter 4, we are told that the sons of Levi can come on duty in the tent of meeting when they turn 30 years old. Now, this is probably a pretty painful birthday for Ezekiel. He probably trained his whole life to be a priest and to work in the temple, but now he was torn from the temple and was far from Jerusalem. However, on the day when Ezekiel was supposed to start his temple duty, God is going to call him to a different ministry, not to be a priest, but to be a prophet. And we know that God ordained Ezekiel for this ministry from before the day of his birth because the day that Ezekiel was born was the same day that Josiah discovered the law in the temple. The year was 622. Now God, he is going to call Ezekiel to prophesy about a still greater temple in the future. This was a turbulent time in world history. When Ezekiel is only 11 years old, the mighty capital of the empire of Assyria, Nineveh, is going to fall to Babylon. Babylon is going to march up from the south and take out Nineveh and then chase the Assyrian army north to Haran and then to Carchemish, where unfortunately Josiah is going to die in battle trying to prevent the Egyptians from joining forces with the Assyrians. Well, he is going to fail, and as a result, his son, Jehoahaz, is going to be taken into exile to Egypt. Now, at this point, Babylon is in full control of Judah, and Jehoiakim is made Babylon's vassal, and he doesn't like that very much. So, in 605, he is going to rebel, but that rebellion is going to be squashed by Babylon, resulting in Judah's first exile, where Daniel is taken into exile. And Jehoiakim, he's going to rebel one more time at the end of his life, a rebellion which is also going to fail and result in his son Jehoiachin being taken into exile along with Ezekiel. 5 years later, quite possibly on his birthday, Ezekiel is going to be sitting by the Kebar Canal and he will see the glory of God. It says here that the heavens were opened and he saw visions of God. Now these visions, they are going to be introduced with the phrase, the hand of the Lord was upon me. And this phrase, the hand of the Lord, it's going to be used 4 times in the book of Ezekiel. The first time is here in Ezekiel chapter 1 with his call narrative, where he sees God's mobile glory throne chariot. And this throne chariot is going to be pulled not by horses, but by 4 living creatures. And these living creatures, they each had 4 faces and 4 wings, and each of them had their own wheel. And these are crazy wheels. We got wheels inside of wheels. They probably looked maybe a little something like this. Now, isn't that an epic picture right there? We got wheels inside of wheels, and there's eyes all over the living creatures and all over the wheels. Well, each of these 4 wheels is going to be supporting what Ezekiel calls the likeness of a throne. And sitting on top of this throne was the likeness of a human appearance, which Ezekiel calls the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. And then this person who is enthroned above the cherubim will speak to Ezekiel in chapter 2, and he will say, I send you, Ezekiel, to a nation of rebels, for they have rebelled against me. And this phrase, they are a rebellious house, is used 7 times in chapters 2 and 3. So clearly, Ezekiel's ministry is not going to be a very pleasant one. However, in chapter 3, when he is handed this mysterious scroll and told to eat it, take a look at this. Ezekiel's handed the scroll and told to eat the scroll. Nom, 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 nom. Eat the scroll. He tells us that it actually tasted pretty good. He ate it and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. This begins the first phase of Ezekiel's ministry, but let's step back to see the big picture. So the first half of Ezekiel, from chapter 1 all the way to 32, is judgment. First against Judah, and then judgment against the nations. But chapters 34 to 48 are going to record prophecies and promises of future restoration. Now, Ezekiel's judgment against Judah is going to alternate between a vision and judgment, and then another vision and more judgment. Now, this is where our timeline comes in. Turns out there is exactly enough time between Ezekiel's first vision and Ezekiel's second vision to perform the sign acts of chapters 4 through 7. So in chapter 4, Ezekiel is told to build a little model of Jerusalem and then to lay down on his side for exactly 390 days. But there are exactly 413 days between Ezekiel's first vision in the 5th year, the 4th month and the 5th day, and Ezekiel's second vision in the 6th year, the 6th month and the 5th day. Now, the second vision is more bad news. Instead of a hand reaching out and giving Ezekiel a scroll for him to eat, this time a hand is going to reach out and grab Ezekiel by a lock of his hair, pick him up, and carry him from Babylon to Jerusalem. There he is, Ezekiel, hanging by a lock of his hair. And what does he see when he gets to Jerusalem? He's going to see just this horrible idolatry taking place in the temple itself. These great abominations. He is going to see, here we are in Ezekiel chapter 8, he's going to see men worshiping the sun and women worshiping Tammuz. There's going to be idols inside of the temple and idols outside of the temple. So what is God going to do about this horrible idolatry taking place in his own temple? Well, he is going to pack up his bags and leave. We read in Ezekiel chapter 8 that all of these abominations are going to drive Yahweh from his sanctuary. So first, we see the presence of God leave from the Holy of Holies there in the temple in Jerusalem and go to the threshold of the temple. And then God's glory presence is going to go from the threshold to the east gate. And then in chapter 11, God's presence is going to leave the city itself and go to the east, to the Mount of Olives. This is a big deal. The same glory which filled the temple after Solomon built it is now going to leave that temple 368 years later. Now, God is going to leave his temple in preparation for its destruction. So God leaves here in 592. 4 years later, Zedekiah is going to rebel against Babylon, and Babylon's going to send its army and besiege the city. And then in 586, Nebuchadnezzar is going to break the siege, destroy the city and the temple itself, and haul its people into exile. This helps us make sense of the 13 chapters of judgment which follow right after the temple vision. So in chapter 17, Ezekiel is going to tell a parable about an eagle. Now, this eagle, this great eagle, is the king of Babylon. And this eagle is going to fly from Babylon to Judah, where he will break off the topmost young twig of this mighty tree. And he's going to take this twig and he's going to carry it back to the land of Babylon. Now, who is this twig? The twig is Jehoiachin, who is taken to Babylon along with Ezekiel in 597. But what happens next? Well, there's going to be another vine. This is the next king of Judah, and he is going to bend towards a second eagle, hoping this second eagle will water him. Now, who's this second eagle? Well, of course, it is Egypt. But what will that first eagle do? Well, Ezekiel tells us here in verse 17 that Pharaoh, eagle number 2, will not help you in war, but rather that vine, Zedekiah, will die in Babylon, which of course is exactly what happens to Zedekiah in 586. Ezekiel's message to the exiles in Babylon was designed to remove false hope. They thought that Egypt could save them, and that Jerusalem would be safe, and that they would return from exile shortly. But Ezekiel says no. The sin of Judah has reached its breaking point, and Jerusalem must fall. But once it does, everything changes in the book of Ezekiel. So this moment, the siege of Jerusalem, is recorded in Ezekiel chapter 24. The year is 588, and Nebuchadnezzar is going to besiege the city of Jerusalem, and Ezekiel will prophesy that when that city falls, a fugitive is going to escape from Jerusalem and travel to Babylon. And when he gets there, Ezekiel will no longer be mute. Now, I didn't tell you this earlier, but in chapter 3, Ezekiel was made mute. Well, 3 years later, in the year 585, that fugitive will arrive in Babylon. And when he gets there, in chapter 33, Ezekiel's mouth is opened. This is a critical moment in the book of Ezekiel. His commission here in chapter 3 as a watchman is going to be repeated in chapter 33 as a signal that his job as a prophet of judgment is over. He has done his job faithfully, and now his mouth has been opened, and he can transition from being a prophet of judgment to being a prophet of hope. And this hope is going to characterize his message from chapter 34 until the end of the book. And therefore, because Israel's shepherds have been bad shepherds, think of Jehoiachin and Zedekiah, Yahweh promises, I will be your shepherd. And because Israel has proven again and again that they have a heart of stone, Yahweh says, I will give you a heart of flesh. And because nations, they have attacked you and they will attack you again in the eschatological future, Yahweh promises, I will come and be your defense. And that valley of dry bones, which is the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, it will be brought to life again in the land. But for Ezekiel's final vision of the temple in 40 to 48, we need to return to the timeline. The year of Ezekiel's final vision is 573, which he tells us is the 25th year of our exile. We are in Ezekiel chapter 40, the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, that is the first month, on the 10th day of the month. Now, this is the exact day of the Exodus, when God liberated his people from Egypt. We read in Exodus chapter 12 that in the first month, on the 10th day of the month, you see, God, he is going to accomplish a second Exodus for Israel. Their kingdom is going to be restored to them, and God's temple presence will be restored in their midst. The first time God's presence took up residence in Israel's camp was in the book of Exodus. But curiously, when God's presence moved in, Moses moved out. He wasn't allowed inside of the tabernacle. If you want to find out why, you should check out this next video.